Hi everyone, welcome to the Seven Kingdoms and More YouTube channel. This is my first YouTube video, so thanks for checking it out, everyone. I appreciate that you're here. So today in my first video, we're going to be covering one of my personal favorite topics, and that is the Team Green faction. And I will be coming at it from both a Fire and Blood and House of the Dragon perspective. And it's very important to mention, everyone, that this video will contain spoilers. So if you do not want to be spoiled for season 2 of Hot D, or if you still want to read Fire and Blood, this is not the video for you. So let's get into the introduction. And again, I want to make this clear, this video will contain spoilers, so I don't want to get yelled at in the comments. So the video breakdown will be character analyses and the similarities and differences from House of the Dragon and Fire and Blood of these three characters. I would say the three top honchos of Team Green: Aegon II, Aemond, Kinslayer, and Queen Alicent. These character analyses will include actions characters took, experiences they've had, their personalities, and as well as some high level strengths and weaknesses that they bring to their faction. Okay, let's get into the content. And before we get into the content, I think the reason I think the greens are so fascinating, and don't get me wrong, I like the blacks. I wouldn't say I'm team green or team black. I actually do subscribe to the theory, if it is really a theory or a fan theory, that Rhaenyra and Daemon's bloodline, or the Black bloodline, had to continue for Dany and Jon to eventually come to that bloodline. I think it was inevitable. I don't think the Green faction, it was meant for them. As in, they were not the line of the prince that was promised, or Azor Ahai, whatever floats your boat. So I do prescribe to that theory if it is one. And I just want to preface that. I just think the Greens are super weird. Like Targaryen Hightowers, like they're so contradictory of each other. Like the Hightowers just like hate incest, and they fought wars with Maegor over that. They're very contradictory, and I think that's why I think the Greens are so fascinating. And if you think about it, the Hightowers are one of the few families that actually intermixed with the Targaryens over the 300-year period ruling Westeros. But anyways, that was a bit of a side tangent. I just wanted to make it clear that I'm not really Team Green or Team Black. I like both of them. I just think Team Green, for some reason, is a little more interesting because, again, I just think the fact that Targaryen Hightowers, like, that's just weird to me. But anyways, let's get into it. So a big similarity between Fire and Blood and House of the Dragon in terms of Aegon's character is he is essentially a monster in both the show and the book. And what I mean by that is he's a sexual abuser. He's a total alcoholic. He really doesn't care about anything, doesn't care about anyone. He only cares about himself. It's kind of what I mean by he's a monster. You can see that multiple times throughout Fire and Blood, and I'm sure most of the people watching this have seen the show, and you can definitely see that um, throughout the show, especially in episode 8, when one of Aegon's serving girls is literally being like heckled by his mother, even though Aegon sexually assaulted her. But you see that in the books too, as well. On top of the kid fighting with the long nails and teeth, remember from episode 9. In season 1, he is totally into that as well in the books. So he really is essentially a monster in the books and the show. He grows up with a ton of status, wealth, and power, and really has very little parental oversight and or real responsibility, which definitely, I mean, I don't think that takes a psychologist to recognize that that can lead to someone becoming very irresponsible with the power that they will eventually have because they had no real responsibility. And this kind of ties into the fact that you don't really see a relationship between Viserys and Aegon throughout the books or the show. I mean, in episode 6, or excuse me, in episode 7, for example, Viserys practically yells at Aegon for calling Rhaenyra's kids, who are clearly bastards, bastards. So he just does not seem to really love his green kids. What I mean by that is Allison's kids of his. He just doesn't really seem to have a relationship with that. It probably does create some resentment on both Aegon and Aemon's sides. So this again creates an impulsive and fairly reckless character. I mean, you'll see in the beginning of season 2 that Aegon just fires Otto and just hires Kristen as the hand of the king because he thinks Kristen's going to be more violent. I mean, it does make the coup almost makes Aegon more decisive, as you can see in the books and the show. I think you'll see that in the show as well, I should say. But it definitely makes him a little more impulsive too and reckless. And throughout his entire when he was growing up in both the books and the show, it's very clear that he's being pressured into being king. He's being told that you will be king or you will die and your whole family will die. In fact, he's even told that by Kristen in the books and Alicent in the show. But let's move on to some differences that you see with Aegon in the book and the show. So I think a fairly large key difference between Aegon II in the books and the show is he has a strong bond with Sunfire in the book. I think they just haven't really gotten there yet in the show, and I actually do have a theory around Sunfire being Sunfire and Aegon having a pretty big moment in season 2. Do you remember when Rhaenyra and Syrax during Rhaenyra's pregnancy of Visenya, her stillborn birth in episode 10, that Syrax was feeling the pain that Rhaenyra was feeling? I think you're going to see that with Aegon after Rook's Rest and Sunfire. They're going to have some telepathic connection when Aegon's feeling all this pain, and so will Sunfire. Sunfire will literally also be physically in pain, but I think they'll have this like telepathic connection. I hope that we see that in season 2. I think that'd be a really cool connection back to Rhaenyra and Syrax, and kind of good alignment. Um, Again, I mentioned this in the other slide a little bit, but Aegon is probably more strong-willed and decisive post-coup in the books than he is in the than I'm guessing he will be in the show. I think in both the books and the show, he will be strong-willed and decisive, and in terms of being a king. But I think he's gonna make different decisions in the show than he will in the books. And again, Hot D Aegon seems slightly lazier and less intelligent, cunning than Book Aegon. And what I mean by that is Book Aegon is definitely a monster, just like Show Aegon, but Show Aegon seems to be a little bit more, I'd say, lazy, just less ambitious. I think Book Aegon still has this ambition, and he's more of a monster than he is just like lazy and kind of an f up, to put it simply. A big difference too is that I bet a lot of show people who just watch the show would never notice this, obviously, is the age difference between he and Rhaenyra is much wider. So I think that even reaffirms his belief more that he should be in the show, that he should be king less, because in the books they're only like 10 years apart. In the show they're like 16, 17 years apart. So I think that creates a complex in Aegon's mind in the show, even more so. He's like, I shouldn't be king. I mean, my older sister's 17 years older than me. This has been being said to me now for almost 20 years, not like 10 years in the books, for example. So it's even a longer time period. This Aegon's been told he's not going to be king. It's going to be Rhaenyra will be queen. And finally, Alicent seems to be a little bit more engaged in Aegon's life, whether that's for better or for worse. Alicent doesn't really seem to interact a lot with Aegon in the books, other than post-coup, obviously, you see more interaction with them. But in the show, even though she doesn't seem to like Aegon, she literally calls him stupid or a moron or an imbecile, I think, in episode 9. She seems to care about his well-being and wants him to succeed, where I don't think you see that in the books, or it's not as made as clear. But now, let's move on to one of my favorite characters in the Song of Ice and Fire, the entire Song of Ice and Fire, and that is Aemond One-Eye, or Aemond Kinslayer. My first bullet point here is, I think in the book and the show, he really is he's narcissistic and he's arrogant. I think that's pretty prevalent. I don't think there needs to be much description on that. You can tell he kind of thinks he's the best. But here's the note that I think is more interesting. That's the God complex note. I truly believe that Aemond has like an extreme God complex. Targaryens by nature are already consider themselves closer to gods than men. You hear Rhaenyra actually say that to Jason Luke in episode 10. So they already think they're essentially gods, and since Aemond rides by far the largest dragon at this point, because Vermithor at this point is not ridden by anyone, and Vermithor is the second closest, and Vermithor still is not that close to Vhagar size. Vhagar is huge, so I think this gives Aemond a god complex on top, because he is riding the largest dragon. He essentially thinks of himself as like the ultimate alpha. And again, there is very little interaction between he and Viserys, like I noted with Aegon. Again, this probably with Aegon and Aemond, this creates resentment towards their father. And I think the whole time, I mean, it's almost weird. Like we never even see them like. I don't think there's like one communication even between Viserys, Aemon, and Aegon. Excuse me, other than episode 7, but that's pretty brief, and Viserys is just yelling at them. So that's exactly my point here. And again, he believes he should be the rightful king the whole time. I mean, you see that in episode 9 when they're trying to capture Aegon. Aegon tells Aemond, hey, "You be king. I will just sail away and go to Yi Ti," which is shout out to Yi Ti. But Aemon's like, "Yeah, that sounds good," and then Kristen pulls him away. But the whole time, Aemond definitely believes that he should be king. He says it in the show to Kristen in episode 9 as well. He is determined to train and be the best soldier, leader, politician, and he essentially sees himself as the de facto leader of Team Green, which you could argue he is, and you will see him essentially be the leader in the next season and be a relentless, brutal leader. I'll tell you that, and we'll get that in the next slide a little bit. So I will admit, I think the show did a good job at aligning uh, the book narrative with Aemon's character because there aren't a lot of differences. I would say a core difference that you definitely see in the show is he definitely has a stronger connection to his Hightower roots and his family in general. Um, in episode 8, when they're all gathered around the table, you see him gracefully, like deep in prayer, for example. That's very different from like Damon, who's Aemon's foil, for example. He seems to have a good relationship with Alicent as well. You see that in episode 7 and episode 9, where in the books you don't really ever even see him communicate with Alicent, to be honest, or read, I should say. And here, the second point's a little interesting here. What I mean by burns the Riverlands down with Vhagar. So that's a spoiler. So you'll probably see that the end of season 2, the beginning of season 3. But Aemon essentially goes like Maegor the Cruel, like crazy, like, and just burns all of the Riverlands down with Vhagar. But my point is, it appears he's bullied more in the show than the books. So my larger point here is, you don't really see in the books that he's bullied by Jason, Luke, and uh, Aegon to the extent I think he is in the show. So my point being is, I think Aemon might be more brutal, vengeful, aggressive, assertive, whatever you want to use in season 2 and season 3 than he is in the books. I think he's even going to be more brutal. I think he's going to be just violent as all hell. I think the Riverlands, it's going to, that scene, if they show it, is going to be just like grotesque. And I think it's just the difference is they're going to almost make it more violent and worse in the show. So that's just my opinion. That's something I think is coming down the road in the show. But let's move on to Alicent. So here's some Fire and Blood and Hot D similarities. Well, her upbringing and background are very similar. She was brought to the King's Landing from Old Town with her dad, Otto, when she was little. She actually read the old King Jaehaerys, who you see in the first episode, at the very beginning. She was like his read to him. I think she like was kind of like his nurse. It's not exactly spelled out in the like his companion in the books. There's actually a theory. I don't want to go down this theory because I think it's a stupid theory, but that Mushroom says in the books that Alicent was actually like sleeping with Jaehaerys. But I don't know if I subscribe to that theory. But other than that, her age gap is definitely different, though. I want to point that out. In the start of the show, she's like 16, and start of the book, she's older than Rhaenyra. Her and Rhaenyra are like the same age in the show. That's not how it is in the books. But like in the book, or like in the show, she is used as a political pawn by her father to gain political power. Um, there's which probably creates resentment towards Otto from Alicent's perspective, and you even see that in episode 9 when she basically tells Otto that, yeah, it's all like you did this all to me, and then he's like, oh, I made you queen, but she's like, I don't even know if I wanted all this. Another similarity, a big similarity, is I would argue, is she does love her children and Viserys deeply. Viserys is a little trickier. It's not really said directly in the book, but I think they do have a good relationship. They don't seem to fight a lot in the books. And she, even though she thinks her children are weird, which actually Olivia Cooke, the actress who plays Alicent, even said, like, describes her relationship with her kids as her thinking that her kids are just weirdos. Essentially, she does love them. I mean, she does care about their well-being. I think she does think, for example, Aegon's kind of a monster, but at the end of the day, she does love him. And finally, She does believe her son should be king in both the book and the show, but the reasoning is wildly different. So we'll get into that in the next slide right here. So in Fire and Blood, Alicent wants Aegon to sit the Iron Throne the entire time. You don't see that in House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon, you see it a little bit, like she thinks in episode 6 and 7 when Rhaenyra is having these bastards that she should, and then they kind of rekindle in 8, and she only thinks that in the show that Aegon should be king because of Viserys's her misinterpretation of Viserys's discussion about his Aegon's dream, Aegon the First, Aegon the Conqueror's dream. So you have there's nothing like that in the books. There's just nothing like that, and I know that was a very controversial, point. Essentially, a lot of people didn't really like that. Kind of thought that was stupid. I think I like it because I think it makes Team Green and Alicent a lot more empathetic. I think without it, it kind of just makes them like power hungry, and people who just drove a coup, pretty much. Not drove a coup. Why did I just say drove a coup? Who pulled off a coup? Where I think in this perspective, it makes Alicent a lot more empathetic, and it makes Team Green a lot more empathetic, because they see it as Alicent sees it as we have to do this to save the world. My son has to be the king. And again, in Fire and Blood, Rhaenyra and her never really have a friendship. Alicent is generally distrusting of Rhaenyra throughout the entire book. So it's a lot easier in the books for Alicent to just be like, yeah, screw Rhaenyra. My kid is going to be king. And again, it makes Alicent's character a little more layered, and I think it makes Team Green's more layered. Team Green more layered. So think about it. I mean, if they just like pulled this coup off and like they just did it for like the power and there was no other like layered reason to it, I feel like I mean most people are already Team Black. Like if you look through these surveys or whatever on YouTube, because I obviously do that, like most people are Team Black already. I think it would be everyone would be Team Black. It would almost be like no fun at that point. So I think this was a good change, and clearly George okayed it. So I think they're gonna do it. I think this will be interesting going forward, and we'll see what they do with this. But that wraps up the conclusion of my video. Um, the next video we're having is Team Green Part 2, so make sure to look out for that. I'll be covering Otto Hightower, Kristen Cole, Foot Lover Larry Strong, and two of my favorites, Helena and Darren Targaryen. Darren the Daring, definitely the man. He should be a fun guy to cover. So look out for that video. And again, thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.